Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we know that Imran Awan and his wife, they were indicted. And the former U.S. attorney is saying that there's something a little strange going on with their indictment. And he's saying there's no press release about the indictment on the office website, though the U.S. Attorney offices routinely issue press releases and make charging documents available in cases of far less national prominence. He also said that why did the FBI allow Alvi to flee before she boarded her March 5th flight to Qatar? That doesn't make any sense, because by the time Alvi fled, the Awans had been under investigation by different federal agencies for at least 3 months. And this whole thing, he's saying, doesn't make sense. There's something very strange here, because they completely left out of the indictment that these individuals were trying to flee the country. And he's saying this is very important to have in the indictment to show that they were leaving, escaping the crime. And he went on to say, let's say you're a prosecutor in Washington. You're investigating a husband and wife, naturalized Americans, who you believe have scammed a federal credit union out of nearly $300,000. You catch them in several false statements about their qualifications for a credit line and their intended use of money. The strongest part of the case, though, involves the schemers transferring the loot to their native Pakistan. So, what's the best evidence you could possibly have? The slam dunk proof that their goal was to steal the money and never look back? That's easy. One after the other, the wife and the husband pulled up stakes and tried to hightail it to Pakistan after they wired the funds there. The wife successfully fleeing, the husband nabbed as he was about to board his flight. There's not a word in it about a flight to Pakistan. The indictment undertakes to describe in detail 4 counts of bank fraud conspiracy, false statements on credit applications, an unlawful monetary transaction, but yet leaves out the most damning evidence of guilt. In fact, the indictment appears to go out of its way not to mention this. So this is very odd and very strange, and it looks like someone there is pulling strings, someone there is protecting what is happening with the Awans, and we can see that the indictment left that out completely, which is very odd in itself. Now, we know that the USS John McCain, it was hit, and it collided with this gigantic oil tanker. And there's a lot of theories out there of why this happened, and one of the theories that the corporate media and the Navy is coming up with is maybe our ships were hacked by the Chinese. Maybe they were cyber attacked, and that's why we crashed into the oil tanker. Now, of course, what proof do they have? They have no proof whatsoever. There is absolutely no proof. So this is very odd in itself. They're trying to create something where they don't even have a story. I mean, they're mentioning it, but there's no proof. There's no sign of hacking. There is absolutely nothing. So they're just out there just saying anything without having proof. Once again, it's propaganda. Now, out in Afghanistan, we see the Department of Defense. They have thousands more American troops on the ground in Afghanistan than it has publicly disclosed. Now, this is according to defense officials. And they're saying that there's approximately 8,400 soldiers deployed in the country, but the total is actually more like 12,000. Now, how are there more soldiers in Afghanistan? The same way there were more soldiers in Iraq than were being reported on the corporate media. It's very simple. They have an agreement for a certain number of troops that are permanent in Afghanistan, and then they have temporary troops with no end date. So they don't count the temporary troops because they're temporary. These aren't the permanent troops. They did the same thing in Iraq. They tell you, yeah, we have, 8,000 or 5,000 or 7,000 permanent troops, whatever that number is. And then all of a sudden we have, 10,000 more, 15,000 more temporary troops without an end date. The same thing is happening in Afghanistan. It's happening in Syria. It's happening in all of these places. Because they don't want you to know what they were really up to. And I see there's a lot of people writing in because of what I said yesterday. How can I take Trump's side? I'm not taking any sides. I'm looking at the entire picture here. I'm looking at what he's saying, what his actions will be. And once again, he might be with the neocons. He might be compromised. Yes, that is a complete possibility. But until we see what is going to happen in Afghanistan, I know Ron Paul is out there and he's saying that this is just going to continue. We're just going to have a war and it's never going to end. Maybe that's true. Maybe it is. But if we hear information coming out of Afghanistan where poppy fields are being shut down, the Islamic State, and Russia is reporting it also, that they are being destroyed, well, then we have the information that we need. Now again, if he is compromised and the neocons are going to continue that war in Afghanistan, they're going to continue the war every place else, well, we're just going to war. That's what's going to happen. It's like having Clinton elected here. But we can see in Syria, where everyone thought after he fired those missiles, we were going to have 100-something thousand, military men and women march into Syria. That didn't happen. Actually, he stopped the funding in Syria. Actually, the Islamic State, the other paid mercenary groups like Al-Qaeda, Al-Sham, and the rest, guess what? They're being annihilated right now. And Russia and Syria, they're getting to the point where they're saying, you know something? We don't want the United States in this country. There's no reason for them to be here. And we're already getting word that once the Islamic State is wiped out, there is no reason to keep U.S. forces there. Now, we're going to have to see if this actually happens. Again, we're watching the actions to see if this really occurs. Because the cabal, they were telling us that we're never leaving. This war against the Islamic State will go on forever. They're too powerful. They're too well funded. That all turned out to be a complete and utter lie. We see the U.S., well, they imposed more sanctions on North Korea, China, and Russia. Well, they've condemned America's most recent sanctions targeting individuals and entities in China and Russia alleged to be conducting business with North Korea. Now again, all of this is to provoke China and Russia. We can see that these sanctions do absolutely nothing. And we can see Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rybakov, well, he condemned the new sanctions, saying they cannot be adopted endlessly because the aim of the sanctions should be reaching a certain result. In this case, North Korea changing its behavior in missile and nuclear sectors. That's the purpose of placing these sanctions on there. Placing it on Russia and China, that doesn't do anything. And we can see they're doing it on purpose to provoke these two countries. Out in Ukraine, we see Poroshenko. Well, it looks like he is launching a rearmament program for its armed forces. He came out and said, listen, we will once again raise the Ukrainian flag. It will fly over Crimea and Donbass. So it looks like he is preparing to go to war once again. Remember, McCain, Graham, they went out to Ukraine and they said this is the year of the offensive. And it looks like this is what they're trying to push right now. We see out in Yemen, Saudi Arabia, the proxy army for the United States and the coalition forces, well, they've hit a civilian area, a small hotel near a Houthi rebel checkpoint, and they killed 41 people. There were 30 civilians there. And there were multiple airstrikes in this area. And the UN, the Red Cross, they were out there saying this is uncalled for. And what we're seeing right now is that this Saudi-led aerial bombardment and naval blockade, they have created a three-pronged humanitarian disaster in Yemen, pushing 17 million people to the brink of starvation, generating the world's fastest growing cholera epidemic and displacing hundreds of thousands of people. This is what the cabal does. Look at Lebanon, look at Libya, look at Syria, look at Yemen, Somalia, Sudan, Ukraine. The cabal is responsible for the deaths of millions and millions of people. They're responsible for the refugee crisis. They're responsible for all of this. If the cabal didn't do any of this, we wouldn't see any of this. So when we go to the root of the problem, it was the cabal, the deep state. They're the ones who did all of this. Now, out in Syria, there is a video that emerged which shows the U.S. allowing the Islamic State fighters to escape safely in Syria. Now, the video footage was obtained by Al Masdar, and it appears to show a convoy of the Islamic State fighters fleeing the Syria city of Raqqa, untouched by the U.S. military. Now, the U.S. right now is currently bombing Raqqa. Now, again, within Syria, the cabal is in control. They're the ones who are calling the shots there right now in certain areas, not every single area. And it shows once again that the cabal allows the Islamic State to move freely wherever they want. And if the situation gets tough, they allow them to leave. And this is exactly what's happening. And of course, what they say is, oh, it was a victory in Raqqa. No. What was happening was they're cleaning house. They're saying, okay, the Islamic State is done for here. We can't use the paid mercenaries. Let them leave before Russia and Syria move into the area. This way we can hide what is going on here, and we can say that, ooh, look, we were successful in capturing Raqqa. Now, the Syrian government, with Russia's help, they have isolated Deir ez-Zor, and the Islamic State there, they have no place to run. They are cut off from everywhere. And we can see all the border points, well, they have been shut down. So the supply lines coming into Syria, well, they, for the most part, have been shut down. And the situation in Syria, coming from Syrian government officials, Russian government officials, they're saying the war against these paid mercenaries, well, it's coming to an end. And it's coming to an end very, very quickly. Now, very interestingly, the United Nations, they issued a rare early warning, signaling a potential civil conflict in America. And the United Nations Committee, they were tasked with combating racism on a global scale, and they've issued an ultra-rare early warning for the United States, citing alarming racism trends. And what they're saying is that there could be some type of civil war. There could be some type of an event. And Anastasia Crickley, chairperson of the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, said the following: "We are alarmed by the racist demonstrations with overtly racist slogans, chants, and salutes by white nationalists, neo-Nazis, and the Ku Klux Klan, promoting white supremacy and inciting racial discrimination and hatred." Now again, we know what this is all about, because we know it is completely clear that the United States is being purposely divided. And the United Nations is clearly playing into the hype of issuing an early warning that has only been issued for third world countries in the past 10 years. So if the continued division in America continues like it is, and they can push these protests and push what has happened in Charlottesville to other cities, guess what happens? They will be able to divide the country, and we will enter a civil war. And what's very interesting, the United Nations dropped this entire warning at this point in time, because we've seen other things happen, but it was timed perfectly. And what they're saying is that they want the government now listen to this, the government to ensure that the rights of freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly are not exercised with the aim of destroying or denying the rights of freedoms and others, and also asked it to provide the necessary guarantees so that such rights are not misused to promote racist hate speech and racist crimes. Well, the UN is calling on the government to ensure the rights. No, the government doesn't have to ensure the rights. The people ensure the right. The government has no say. It's we the people. It's not we the government. So the people are already born with this right. We don't need the government to guarantee it, but you can see what they're doing. The government will guarantee it. The government will permit it. The government says now your rights are privileges. And this is what they're trying to push. They're trying to convince everyone that the government, they're the ones who hold the power to guarantee that you, the people, have this right. But in reality, it's the opposite. The people already have the rights. We don't need the government to guarantee anything. We can go out there and spew hate speech. We can spew love. We can spew anything we want because it's freedom of speech. There's no difference between hate, love, funny speech. It's all the same speech. It's freedom of speech. You might not like what you're hearing. You might not laugh at the joke. But the person has every right. Because who decides what is free and what can or cannot be said, or what books can be out there? They're trying to control the people and freedom of speech. That's what they're doing right now. And the UN purposely came out with this statement. And we can see what they're trying to do, because in the end, the UN, they want to basically be in control of the rights of the people, which is really not the rights of the people, it's the privileges for the people, where they can say, wait a minute, no, this is what we want to happen here. And again, here in the United States, we don't need the UN. We have the Constitution. It's we, the people.